My name is Reagan, and today we're going to be doing Experiment 2, measuring mass and density. All matter has mass and volume. Mass is measured in grams or kilograms and is a measurement of how much matter a material contains. So volume is measured in liters or milliliters and is a measurement of how much space an object occupies. Using mass and volume, we can determine the density of an object or of a solution by dividing mass by its volume. So before we begin the experiment, we need to make sure we practice appropriate lab etiquette. For instance, we need to be wearing a lab coat buttoned all the way up with no skin exposed below the waist. That includes wearing long pants and closed-toed shoes. You need to wear your gloves, your safety glasses which are closed, and also any loose hair needs to be tied back. The materials we'll be using today are a number of beakers, a graduated cylinder, an unknown metal cylinder, an unknown liquid sample, and an analytical balance. First, we're going to learn how to measure a sample of water using the analytical balance and how to subtract the mass of a beaker from the mass of the water plus the beaker together so that we have just the mass of the water. So to begin, make sure the balance is on and that it is level. If it is not level, please ask your TA for help to level out the balance. Whenever you're measuring using an analytical balance, you want to make sure all the doors are closed as you're measuring. This will prevent any wind currents or anything from coming through and disrupting your measurement. You also want to make sure that the balance stays very clean. If you spill any chemicals or water inside the balance, you want to make sure to remove those carefully using a brush as not to harm the balance itself. And then one last thing is to never add chemicals or water or solids to a weigh boat or a beaker inside the balance. But first remove the beaker from the balance, then add your water, and then place it back in the balance. This will prevent you from spilling any chemicals inside of the balance here. So to begin, make sure you turn on the balance by hitting the power button, which on this balance is also 0. You want to open one of the doors and place the beaker that you're going to be measuring on the center of the balance, and then close the door. You can then wait for the measurement to stabilize before making your recording. Once you make your recording, make sure you write it down in your lab book using all of the digits that are given to you on the balance. You can do this same procedure with a second beaker, and then again using a watch glass and a stopper and whatever else you need to measure within your lab book. So to measure the mass of liquids by difference, get a clean beaker that is dry and place it in the balance. You can then write down the mass of the beaker in the balance and remove the beaker from the balance. You can then measure out 20 milliliters of water using a graduated cylinder. You may need to get down closer to be able to see the gradations on the graduated cylinder and to measure accurately. So outside of the balance, add the water that you just measured in your graduated cylinder to the beaker. And then place the beaker into the balance. You can then take the mass that you have gotten with the beaker and the water and subtract the mass of the beaker in order to obtain the mass of the water alone. To calculate the density of water, you can take the mass of water, which we have found is close to 19 or 20 grams, and divide it by the volume of water, which is 20 milliliters. The density of water should be close to 1 gram per milliliter, but it may vary based on your measurement and based on the temperature of the water. Next, we will be determining the density of an unknown liquid. In your lab book, there is a table with glycerol percentages and their respective densities. We have a sample here, which is glycerol with water of a certain percentage. We're going to be determining the percentage of glycerol in water by measuring its density. To do so, we're going to add 20 milliliters of this glycerol unknown to a graduated cylinder and measure it in the analytical balance and then calculate the density. So let's measure out our glycerol unknown into the graduated cylinder. You can then add it to a beaker that you first weighed on the analytical balance. Make sure that you add the glycerol to the beaker outside of the balance and then weigh the mass of the beaker and the unknown liquid together. Obtain its mass, subtract the mass of the beaker, and then divide it by its volume, which is 20 milliliters. This will give us the density of the unknown liquid, which will help us determine its percentage. So next we're going to be determining which metal cylinder we've been given by our TA. You need to get a metal cylinder and first weigh it on the analytical balance to 3 decimal places. Once you have weighed it on the analytical balance, you can then remove it and then pour 20 milliliters of water into a graduated cylinder again. You then need to carefully put your metal cylinder into the graduated cylinder. Try not to drop it directly in, as it may break the bottom of the glass, but instead slide it or use a pair of tweezers. You can then measure the difference in volume of your graduated cylinder against the initial 20 milliliters of water that you've added. This will tell you the volume of the metal cylinder in question. You can then take the mass from the balance, divide it by the volume, and then obtain the density, which will correlate to the chart in your lab book and tell you what this metal cylinder is made of. So that concludes experiment 2, measuring mass and density. If you have any further questions, please ask your TA for help.